My name is Lena Carter, and I was 16 the night my parents erased me from their perfect little world. They didn't just throw me out of the house, they threw me out of their lives, out of every photograph, every family memory, every story they would ever tell about their only daughter. That night, I remember standing by the front door, barefoot, trembling, the rain soaking through my clothes. My mother stood behind my father, her face pale and wet with tears, but she didn't say a word. Not one. My father's voice was louder than the thunder outside. "You've disgraced us, Lena. Do you have any idea what people will say?" "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Please just let me talk." He laughed bitterly. "You're 16 and pregnant. There's nothing left to talk about." I remember the smell of his cologne, sharp, clean, cold, the same scent that used to mean safety, but that night it smelled like rejection. He opened the door, pointed at it, and said the words that shattered me forever. "Get out." I looked at my mother, praying for her to stop him, to say something, anything, but her lips just trembled. She looked at the floor and whispered, "You've brought shame to us all." And then the sound, that horrible sound, the door slamming shut, my heart collapsing, my whole world ending. I stood outside for hours, clutching the small backpack I had packed weeks ago just in case. I didn't even know where to go. Every raindrop that hit my face felt like punishment. Every flash of lightning reminded me that I was alone now, completely, utterly alone. I walked until my legs gave up. I found a park bench and curled up under it like a stray dog. I remember talking to the baby inside me, whispering, "It's okay. I'm here. I'll take care of you." But my voice broke halfway through because I didn't believe myself. I met Ethan when I was 15. He was 2 years older, a senior, the kind of boy who didn't care about grades or trophies. He had a crooked smile, a war, knout guitar, and dreams bigger than this town. He called me Star because he said I glowed when I laughed. I thought he was just being sweet until I realized he meant it. He made me feel seen, not as Mr. and Mrs. Carter's daughter, but as Lena. I'd sneak out to meet him near the old bridge by the lake. We'd sit there for hours, talking about music, about how he wanted to leave this town and start a band. He promised he'd take me with him one day. When I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified. I didn't tell him right away. I wanted to wait until I was sure. But my body betrayed me, the sickness, the fatigue, the way my uniform stopped fitting. My mother noticed, and everything fell apart. The shouting started that evening, my father's voice echoing through the house, my mother crying in the kitchen. "Who is he?" my father demanded. When I told him Ethan's name, he slammed his hand against the wall so hard that the picture frames fell. "He's trash," he said. "You're not seeing him again, ever." The next day, Ethan tried to come to our house. My father threatened to call the police. After that, Ethan disappeared. I didn't blame him. He was just 17. How could he fight against people like my parents? But still, every night, I waited by the window hoping he'd show up, hoping someone would care. No one did. The weeks after I was kicked out were a blur. I stayed wherever I could, bus stations, park benches, once even behind an old church. I hadn't eaten properly in days. I was dizzy, scared, and angry. At 16, you're supposed to be worried about grades, friends, maybe prom. I was worried about where to sleep without getting robbed. One night, I fainted outside a diner. When I opened my eyes, a woman in her 30s was kneeling beside me. She had curly red hair, a tired smile, and eyes full of concern. "You okay, sweetheart?" she asked. Her name was Mara, and she owned the diner. She took me inside, gave me soup, and let me sit near the kitchen where it was warm. I told her bits of my story, not everything, just enough. She didn't ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. "You can stay in the storage room for a while," she said softly, "but you'll have to help around here." And just like that, I had a roof again. For months, I washed dishes, wiped tables, and tried to save every coin I could. The customers were kind enough, though some whispered behind my back. I didn't care. I had stopped caring about what people thought the night my parents threw me away. Mara was like the mother I never had, strict when she needed to be, but always gentle. She took me to the clinic when my belly started to show. She made sure I ate properly. Sometimes I'd wake up crying, dreaming of my old bedroom, the pink curtains, the bookshelf, the photos on the wall. I wondered if my parents had taken them down or burned them, but the pain slowly turned into something else, determination. I was going to survive for me, for my baby. When my due date came, it was the hardest night of my life. The contractions started at midnight while I was cleaning the counter. Mara rushed me to the hospital, holding my hand the entire way. Hours later, I heard the smallest, sweetest cry, my daughter's. They placed her in my arms, and I swear, for the first time in my life, I felt love that was pure, unconditional, and whole. I named her Hope because that's what she was. Hope in the middle of everything I'd lost. But even as I held her, I made myself a promise that one day I'd be more than just the girl they threw away. I'd build something no one could take from me again. Years passed in a blur of sleepless nights and long shifts. I worked wherever I could, cleaning houses, waiting tables, sewing clothes for extra money. Every penny went to Hope. Mara eventually moved away to care for her sick sister, but before she left, she hugged me tight and said, "You're stronger than you think, Lena. Don't ever forget that." I didn't. Hope grew up fast, curly hair like mine, but her father's bright smile. Every time she laughed, I saw Ethan's face flash before me, and I wondered where he was. Did he know about her? Did he even care? I wanted to hate him. I tried, but part of me still remembered the boy with the guitar, promising me a life beyond the cages my parents built. Still, I couldn't let my heart distract me. I had a daughter to raise and a life to rebuild. By the time I turned 22, I had saved enough to rent a small apartment in the city. It wasn't much, a single room, cracked walls, an old couch that smelled like dust, but it was ours. I took online courses, earned my GED, and started learning bookkeeping. A local restaurant hired me as an assistant manager. For the first time, I could afford to buy Hope new clothes instead of hand-me-downs. Every night before bed, she'd climb into my lap and ask, "Mommy, do I have grandparents?" My throat would tighten. "They live far away, baby," I'd say, but sometimes when she was asleep, I'd take out an old photograph me at 13, between my parents, smiling like the world was perfect. I'd stare at it for hours, wondering if they ever thought about me, wondering if they regretted it. What I didn't know then was that fate was preparing to throw them back into my life, and this time, I wouldn't be the one begging at the door. Years went by, and life began to shape me in ways I never expected. I used to believe survival was about holding on, but I learned it's really about letting go of pain, of anger, of the past that refuses to die. But some ghosts never leave quietly. Mine wore expensive suits and had my father's eyes. It started with a phone call. I was 24, working late at the restaurant office, closing out the week's accounts. The city outside was wrapped in mist, and Hope was at her friend's house for a sleepover. The phone rang, and when I answered, a woman's voice said, "Is this a mess, Carter?" I hesitated. "Yes, this is St. James Hospital. We're trying to reach a relative of Mr. and Mrs. Carter." The pen fell from my hand. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My heart pounded so loud that the room seemed to shake. "What happened?" I whispered. "There's been an accident. They were in a car crash. We found your number listed under emergency contact in an old record. Can you come?" Old record. I almost laughed. They erased me years ago. But somewhere, somehow, I was still written down like a ghost they couldn't quite delete. I didn't know why I went. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was that small, stupid piece of my heart that still wanted to be loved by them. I told my manager I had to leave and caught the first cab to the hospital. When I reached the ER, the world felt unreal. The smell of antiseptic, the faint sound of machines beeping, nurses rushing down the corridor. And there through a glass door I saw them. My father lay unconscious, bandaged from head to toe, breathing through a tube. My mother sat in a wheelchair, her arm in a sling, eyes red and tired. For a moment she looked up and our gazes met. Lena, she said, like the name tasted foreign to her tongue. I froze. All the words I had imagined for years vanished. She started crying. You came, she whispered. You really came. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to tell her how many nights I'd slept on the street, how many times I'd wished for her to come find me. But instead, I just stood there silent, shaking, holding the same tears I had the night they threw me out. My father remained unconscious for weeks. I visited sometimes, mostly out of confusion. My mother tried to talk to fill the silence between us. She told me how business had gone bad, how my father had changed after I left angry, colder, quieter. She said she'd kept my childhood room untouched for years, even though he forbade it. I looked for you, she said once, but I didn't know where to start. I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't. The truth was simple: she hadn't fought for me when it mattered most. And that silence had cost me everything. Still, I didn't walk away. Maybe I just needed closure. Maybe I wanted her to see who I had become. A woman who didn't need their approval anymore. When my father woke up, it was different. His voice was weaker, his arrogance gone. The first thing he said when he saw me was, "Lena." I nodded. He looked down, ashamed. "You shouldn't have come." "You're right," I said, "but I did." He tried to smile, but it was sad, broken. I deserved that. I didn't answer. Days turned into weeks. He began physical therapy, and I helped where I could. I told myself it was just kindness, not forgiveness. But deep down, I knew something was changing. He asked about Hope one evening. "She's 8 now," I said, showing him a picture. "Her name is Hope." He stared at the photo for a long time. His eyes glistened. "She looks like you," he murmured, "and a little like that boy." I froze. "You remember him?" "I remember everything," he said. "I hated him because he reminded me of who I used to be, young, wild, stupid. But he wasn't the problem, I was." For the first time, I saw regret in his face, genuine, raw regret. It scared me because I didn't know what to do with it. My visits became regular. Hope came with me sometimes, shyly bringing flowers for her grandma and grandpa. My mother wept every time she saw her. My father tried to walk again, holding onto the railings, sweat dripping from his forehead. Life had twisted itself in ways I never could have imagined. The parents who once abandoned me now depended on me to survive. One evening, while I was leaving the hospital, a man approached me in the parking lot. His hair was longer now, tied back, and he carried a guitar case. My heart stopped. "Ethan," I breathed. He smiled faintly. "Hey, Star." I hadn't heard that name in 8 years. It hit me like lightning, the bridge, the laughter, the promises we never kept. He looked older, tired, but his eyes were still the same. "I heard about your father's accident," he said. I was worried. I didn't know what to say. "How did you even know where I was?" He shrugged. "Small town, people talk. I figured you'd be here." I crossed my arms, uncertain. "What do you want, Ethan?" He sighed. "To apologize for disappearing. I was scared, Lena. My parents sent me away when they found out you were pregnant. I thought I'd ruined your life. I didn't have the guts to face you." I wanted to scream, to hit him, to tell him how his silence had nearly killed me. But when I looked at him, I saw the same guilt I carried every day, the weight of choices we couldn't undo. "You didn't ruin my life," I said softly. "You were just part of how it started." He smiled sadly. "Do you hate me?" "I don't have time to hate anyone anymore." He nodded. "I'd like to meet her, our daughter." Those words made my knees weak. I wanted to say no, to protect Hope from more heartbreak. But something in me whispered that she deserved to know where she came from. "Maybe," I said, "but not yet." Weeks turned into months. My father's condition improved, though he never fully recovered. He called me often, just to talk about business, about life, sometimes about nothing at all. My mother spent most of her days cooking for Hope and pretending everything was normal. It wasn't. It never would be. One afternoon, my father asked me to visit his office, the same office where he'd once banned me from entering. His desk was smaller now, his company nearly bankrupt, but the pride in his eyes flickered one last time. "There's something I need to show you," he said. He pulled out a folder and handed it to me. Inside were legal documents, property papers, bank records, a will. "It's all yours," he said. "The house, the land, whatever's left, you earned it." I shook my head. "I don't want your money. It's not money, Lena," he said quietly. "It's an apology, the only one I can give." I looked at him, at the man who had once called me a disgrace, and I realized something. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It just means you stop bleeding every time you remember. I took the papers, not out of greed, but because I knew what I'd do with them. I sold the land, closed his old business, and used the money to open something, New Hope's Diner, a small place near the city where people like me could find warmth, food, and maybe a second chance. The first night we opened, I placed a small photograph near the register of a 16-year-old girl, drenched in rain, standing outside a closed door, a reminder of where it all began. Ethan came that evening. He helped paint the walls, played his guitar for the customers, and quietly earned a place in Hope's life. She didn't know who he really was at first, but she liked him, and for the first time, I allowed myself to feel something I had buried long ago, peace. But peace never lasts forever. One rainy night, a woman came into the diner. She was young, maybe 19, with bruises on her arms and fear in her eyes. She asked if she could stay until morning. I looked at her and saw myself, the same desperation, the same loneliness. "You can stay," I told her, no questions asked. That night, as I watched her sleep in the booth, Hope whispered, "Why do you help people like her, Mommy?" I smiled softly. "Because someone once helped me. A life had come full circle. I was no longer the girl begging at a closed door. I was the woman holding it open for others. But even as the years softened my pain, the scars never disappeared. Sometimes, when I stood by the window of the diner at night, watching the rain fall, I could still hear the echo of that door slamming shut, not as a wound anymore, but as a reminder of who I became after it. It's strange how time changes the way pain feels. It doesn't vanish. It just settles deeper, like dust on old memories. You stop bleeding, but the scars never fade completely. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, thinking I'm 16 again, standing in the rain with nowhere to go. But then I hear Hope's laughter from the next room, and I remember I survived. 5 years had passed since I opened Hope's Diner. It had become more than a business. It was a refuge. People came not just for food, but for warmth, the kind I had once begged for. We had regulars, families, even students who studied there for hours. And every night I'd look around and think, this is mine. I built this from nothing. My parents' health had declined over time. My mother's arthritis worsened. My father's heart was failing. I visited them often, bringing Hope along. She would read stories to them, sometimes sitting on my father's knee, and I'd watch the man who once called me a disgrace smile like a child. But deep down, I knew we were running out of time. One evening, my father called me to his room. His voice was faint, the kind that comes from someone who knows the end is near. "Lena," he said, "there's something I need to tell you before I go." I sat beside his bed, holding his hand. His skin felt paper, thin, fragile. "When I threw you out that night," he whispered, "I thought I was protecting our name. But all I did was destroy our family. I wanted control, not love, and I lost everything because of it." He coughed, struggling to breathe. "When the crash happened, I thought it was punishment. Maybe it was, but seeing you again, it gave me a chance to see the woman you became, stronger than I ever was." Tears blurred my vision. I wanted to say it didn't matter anymore, but it did. It always had. He squeezed my hand weakly. "I'm sorry, Lena. I can't change the past, but I hope you can forgive me before I leave." I swallowed hard. "You already did one good thing," I said quietly. "You gave me life, the rest. I handled myself." He smiled faintly. "That's my girl." Those were his last words to me. He passed away in his sleep that night, his hand still holding mine. The funeral was quiet. Few people came. My mother sat beside me, dressed in black, holding a small white flower. When everyone left, she turned to me with swollen eyes. "I don't deserve to ask this," she said, "but can I stay with you for a while? The house feels too empty." I nodded. Not because I had forgotten, but because I had learned that forgiveness doesn't free the other person, it frees you. She moved into a small room above the diner. It took time, but we began to heal in our own awkward way. She helped with Hope's homework, folded napkins, smiled more than I remembered. Some days I'd catch her staring at me with tears in her eyes, like she still couldn't believe I was real, that I hadn't disappeared like a bad dream. Ethan became a part of our lives slowly, carefully. He never forced himself in. He'd visit the diner every Friday night, playing his guitar for the customers. Hope adored him, and after 2 years I told her the truth. "He's your father," I said one evening, my heart racing. She looked at me for a long time, then smiled softly. I already knew. She whispered, "You both have the same eyes." Ethan cried when he heard that. He promised to be there for her, no matter what. And for once I believed him. But my life wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about what I could do with the future. One rainy afternoon, almost like the night I was thrown out years ago, I saw a young girl standing outside the diner. She was soaked, clutching a torn backpack, shivering under the awning. Her face was pale with fear, her eyes full of shame. I opened the door. "Come in," I said. She hesitated. "I don't have money." "You don't need any," I replied. "Just come in." She sat at a booth near the window, and I brought her soup and a towel. Slowly, she told me her story. She was 17, pregnant. Her parents had kicked her out. The words hit me like a ghost whispering through time. When she finished, she looked down. "I guess I deserve it," she murmured. I sat beside her. "No, sweetheart," I said softly. "You don't deserve to be punished for love or for being human." She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. "How do you know?" I smiled faintly. "Because I've been you." I gave her a place to stay, a small room upstairs next to my mother's. Hope brought her blankets and talked to her like a sister. The girl's name was Isabel, and slowly she began to smile again. That night, as I closed the diner, I stood by the window and watched the rain fall. The same sound, the same rhythm as years ago, but it didn't hurt anymore. It sounded like peace. A few months later, something unexpected happened. A local newspaper wanted to feature the diner, a place that changes lives. They called it. They sent a reporter to interview me. I was nervous, but I told my story not as a victim, but as someone who rebuilt herself. When the article came out, the headline read, "From the Streets to Success, the Girl Who Turned Rejection into Hope." People started coming from nearby towns, curious to meet me, to eat at the diner that carried my daughter's name. Business grew. I hired more people, many of them single mothers or girls with nowhere to go. One of them, a shy woman named Kira, told me, "You don't just give us jobs, you give us dignity." I smiled. Because that's what someone once gave me. One night, as I was closing up, I found my mother sitting alone at one of the tables, staring at the photo by the counter, the one of me at 16, standing in the rain. She looked at me and whispered, "I've spent years asking God why I didn't fight harder for you. I can't forgive myself." I sat across from her. "You don't have to," I said gently. "Just be here now, that's enough." She nodded, wiping her tears. "You became everything I wasn't brave enough to be." I took her hand. We both survived. That's enough, too. When Hope turned 13, she asked me to tell her the full story, not the fairy tale version, but the truth. So I did. I told her about the night I was thrown out, about Ethan, about Mara, about everything. When I finished, she hugged me and said, "Mom, you're my hero." I smiled through tears. "No, baby, you're my reason." Years kept passing. The diner thrived. Hope grew into a brilliant young woman. Ethan and I learned to be friends, maybe even something more. My mother lived to see her granddaughter graduate high school. On her last day, she held my hand and whispered, "Thank you for letting me come home." I told her, "You never really left. I just had to find you again." She smiled, closed her eyes, and was gone peacefully, finally free. Sometimes I still visit my parents' graves, not out of sadness, but gratitude. I bring flowers, talk to them, tell them about Hope's dreams, about how the diner is expanding, about Isabel's baby boy who calls me Aunt Lena. And I tell them, "You were wrong about me. I wasn't a disgrace. I was just unfinished." Last week, I stood outside the diner after closing. It was raining again, the same kind of cold drizzle that once drove me into the streets. I tilted my face toward the sky and let it fall, smiling, because the rain no longer reminded me of pain. It reminded me of rebirth. Inside, the lights from the diner glowed warm and golden. Hope was behind the counter, serving hot chocolate to a late-night traveler. Ethan was tuning his guitar. Laughter filled the air, the kind I used to think I'd never hear again. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt whole. My story didn't end when they closed the door. It began when I opened it again.